Hello there, you're joining us on our special panel discussion where we will be extensively speaking about the Indo-Sri Lanka fishermen issue, which has really grappled the country's relations, and it has severed relations between India and Sri Lanka. And today we will be having 5 panelists joining us on our show where they will be extensively speaking about the economic and political repercussions of the Indo-Sri Lanka fishermen issue. First up, we have Dr. Muthukrishnan Sarvanathan joining us on our show, and he will be speaking about the economic issues pertaining to this. And second, we have Mr. Tyagaraja Vardas, and he'll be touching a little bit about the political issues pertaining to the Indo-Sri Lanka fishermen issue. And third, we have attorney at law KVA's Ganesh Rajan, who will be speaking about the legal aspect of it. And we have 2 leaders representing the Fishermen Cooperative Society unions from the north, and we will be discussing extensively about how we can really resolve this issue and how exactly we can get about this, because this is of national importance. Recently we saw Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe on his visit to India having this high on his agenda. This was extensively spoken about because this is of national importance. First up, let's just speak about little bit about the developments pertaining to the discussions between state leaders on this Indo-Sri Lanka fishermen issue. Dr. Muthukrishnan Sarvanathan, what have we done? What has happened so far?
Even during the most recent visit of the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka to India, although, as I said, it was high on the agenda, the final statement issued by both the leaders stressed that it is an issue which has to be resolved between the fishing communities of the 2 countries. Unfortunately, this is somewhat an evasive way for politicians to not take concrete action on this issue, because fisherpersons of both India and Tamil Nadu have had series of talks since the ceasefire time. Most recently, I think 2010, and again perhaps 2013, our fisherpersons have traveled to Tamil Nadu, and Tamil Nadu fisherpersons have traveled to Sri Lanka and had negotiations and agreed upon certain concrete actions to be taken. Unfortunately, our fisher people think that those agreement has not been implemented at all.
Dr. Muthukrishnan, now you were saying that they're evading this issue. More or less they're passing the buck.
Sure.
Why are they doing this? There should be a reason.
This is a complicated issue. As you know, the relationship between Sri Lanka and India is quite a complicated issue, especially since, I think, 1980, when the ethnic civil war erupted. Everyone knows that India had directly interfered in the conflict in Sri Lanka by various ways. Because of that, for Sri Lankan government as well, that issue is the prime bilateral issue since then, up to today. So all these kind of economic issues affecting the Sri Lankan section of the Sri Lankan people, or even if it is like free trade between India and Sri Lanka, kind of issues are somewhat secondary. So because, as you know, the ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka has not been politically resolved, though militarily it has been successfully eliminated, the issue is still politically unresolved. So naturally both the countries want to have cordial relationship. And for the center, to be fair with the government of India as well, for the central government of India, for them it is mainly a largely issue of the Tamil Nadu state government, which is dominated by the Tamil population there, who have uninterruptedly shown solidarity with the Tamil people in the northern and eastern provinces throughout the civil war. So they also perhaps are reluctant to take concrete actions on their side because of the local political sensitivities of the state government of Tamil Nadu.
And Dr. Muthukrishnan, earlier when I started, I said we are going to dig deep to find out what really the reason is for this. So for that, we really need to find out what the root cause for this. Now, like you said, Indo-Sri Lanka fishermen issue has been long time coming. It has been something that has been happening over the past. So can you point out and say what exactly the root cause for this is?
Okay, this is a very complicated question. Anyhow, historically, both the fisher persons have been fishing in the Pork Bay, Pork Strait, and in the Bay of Gulf of Mannar quite harmoniously, even trespassing each other's border. However, I think if I remember correctly, only in the mid or late 70s, there were maritime boundaries set between the two countries legally. So after that, since the early 80s, on the Sri Lankan side, we have had a long drawn-out civil war. Therefore, our fisher persons' technological advancement have been very much curtailed, whereas Indian fishermen's technological advancement in terms of modern boats or nets have improved a lot. Because of that, on the Indian side of the Pork Bay or the Pork Strait, the fish stock has depleted because of extensive harvesting. Therefore, but on the Sri Lankan side, we have enough fish because our fishermen were not allowed for security reasons to fish. Therefore, we had a greater stock of fish. Therefore, Indian fisher person have been have come into our maritime territory and have harvested our fish stock. Again, during the conflict time, there have been confrontation between Sri Lanka Navy as well as the Indian fisher persons. Yet, only a small proportion of the people who violate the maritime boundary between the countries have been really arrested or brought to courts or somehow released because of bilateral relationship issues. So technologically, our fishermen have been somewhat lagging behind the Indian counterparts. And soon after the war ended, our fisher persons were allowed rather freely to go and fish. Then, of course, naturally, the confrontation magnified because previously it was a one-way show. Sort of Indian trawlers were intruding into our waters. But now there is intense competition for the relatively lesser fish stock in the sea, where Sri Lankan fishermen and Indian fishermen compete for that smaller stock. Whereas they have modern trawler boats which are not only taking away fish stock from our boundary, but also damaging the nets and other gears, fishing gears of our fisher persons, thereby creating a lot of hardships, livelihood hardships for the people who are directly or indirectly involved in fishing in the northern waters particularly.
And this question is directed at Attorney at Law KVS Ganesharajan. Recently, Indian Minister of External Affairs Sushma Swaraj, on a visit when she came down, on an interview she said that this issue of the Indo-Sri Lanka fishermen issue should be looked at a more humanitarian point of view than a legal point of view. Do you agree with her statement?
It is not solely for the simple reason, if it is an issue only humanitarian ground, then we shouldn't have entered into two bilateral agreements in 1974 and the 76. Before we proceed to what is the root cause for this, because in 1974 and 76, clearly there are two agreements between Sri Lankan government and the Indian government. And according to the 1976 agreement, it has been very clearly demarcated. And the three areas that is involved in the demarcations were, that is Gulf of Mannar, as Professor said, so Bay of Bengal and Pork Bay. Therefore, rightly or wrongly, the international maritime borderline has been defined by the agreement in 1976. So since there is an agreement between two countries, both the countries bound by these agreements and the terms and conditions. And India, on the part of Indian government, they have to take steps and take necessary steps in order to keep on with the terms and conditions that have been contained in 1976 agreement. Thereafter, now the purpose of meeting here is there is a clear violation. Then, since there is a violation, there are only two aspects. One is how we can meet the situation by legally and politically. So for the question that you have asked, it is not purely on humanitarian ground, because if it is a pure humanitarian, there is no necessity to have two agreements. And subsequently in 1979 and 2009, there are two acts, that laws in Sri Lanka have been passed in respect of this. And those two acts specifically confers power to the respective authorities to take action whoever these fishermen who comes from South India or India violates the law. Therefore, it is not purely humanitarian ground. We have to look at legally as well, because that is where we can put a full stop to this issue.
And also Prime Minister
Government has to take
we
steps.
released some of the Indian fishermen even after. We
That's
didn't
right.
stick
So
to our
then,
policy.
Yes, there is a mechanism. So the other question is whether the existing mechanism is being used properly in order to prevent that. As I mentioned to you, the very act that is in existence in 59 of 1979, the Fisheries Act, that confers the jurisdiction over the High Court to take action legally and confiscate the instrument that is being used. And then we have to look at practically what happens now.
So do you think this 1976 agreement should be renewed in order to establish the fact that there is an agreement? I don't think anyone is not much of people are aware of this. To make sure that this doesn't happen again, do you think this should be the two governments should get together and maybe sign an agreement that would really, send a strong message to the fishermen out there?
I don't think it's required to be renewed, because already there are two agreements, that is 72, 74 and the 76 is in force. So in view of that, and considering the issues of this fisheries in that area, Sri Lankan government and we Sri Lankans, we have passed 59 of 1979 Fisheries Act, where the entire power has been vested with the Secretary to regulate, control and manage fishing and related activities by foreign boats in Sri Lanka. So we have mechanism. Only thing is...
So does that mean we can use hard power to mitigate?
Of course, because we have mechanism. So what happens now is, whenever these South Indian fishermen who have been arrested, either by Navy or any fisheries department officials or police or whoever, they take it to the magistrate court and normally they demand. And thereafter, with the intervention of the High Commission in Sri Lanka, normally they discharge. So what happens is, thereafter nothing happens. So if we can take steps on the basis of the existing laws, there are two laws, that is 1979 Fisheries Act, and specifically for this purpose, and the Sri Lanka Coast Guard Act 41 of 2009, where when we look at both acts, the powers have been vested with even armed forces to take necessary steps. Therefore, we have all measures in our system. Only thing is we have to enforce it properly, then definitely we will be able to overcome this issue.
And Mr. Tyagaraja, you will be speaking extensively about the political aspect of this, like I mentioned earlier. Now, India has been, Tamil Nadu in particular, has been the voice of Tamils. Even in Sri Lanka, they've advocated so much during the war, and even after the war, they've protested in order to safeguard the freedom of the Tamils. But when it comes to the Indo-fishermen issue, they are being a bit hypocritical, because they are snatching away what belongs to the Tamils in that area, in the northern part. They don't let them fish, like people claim they don't. Do you see this as something that will bring about a political solution in the future? Do you think this is going to be in limbo forever, or do you think there is some sort of solution in the near future?
For me, The solution is possible provided that we have certain concrete measures taken by the relevant authorities. So that's why we are here to talk about that as well. So Tamil Nadu is playing a political game, that is very clear. So the very same Tamil Nadu who gave voice to the Elam Tamilers is now stealing the daily bread of our Tamil people in the north. So this is a sort of, as you correctly said, a hypocritic behavior. But what is important for the Sri Lankan fishermen is to make sure that there won't be trawlers in near future, so that they could resume their fishing activities and perhaps contribute to the national production of seafood fisheries productions in the country. If you look at the pre-war contribution of the northern province to the total fisheries production, it used to be more than 47% of the total productions. So right now it has 12%. The entire northern province just contributes only 12% of the total fisheries production. This is for me, this is not a humanitarian issue for Tamil Nadu fishermen. This is a humanitarian issue for our fishermen, and it's very sometimes. It's very interesting to see how this is being propagated in Tamil Nadu and the mainstream media. That is the best because the over-capitalized mechanized trawling in Tamil Nadu have over-harvested the fishing resources in their own sea, which is the main cause why they are encroaching into our sea, which is demarcated by the agreement that lawyer has said. So I think it's one of the best way to do is to enforce a proper deterrence, both in the border and through the legal terms. You asked the question that is it okay to resort for a hard decision? I think enforcing law in your own country is not a hard decision. India does the same thing. Indian government never taken a soft position of the fishermen, Sri Lankan fishermen, that they arrest. They go through the same hierarchy of the judicial procedure and the prison and everything. They take forever to release our fishermen. So I don't see any point in delaying our legal measures that can be taken easily by the government, except a political will.
Joining us on a special panel discussion on the Indo-Sri Lanka fishermen issue. And before the break, I asked Mr. Tyagaraja Varadas about whether the discussions between India and Sri Lanka are in limbo. Could you please enlighten us about it?
One could basically ask whether there is a discussion or not, first thing. Right? For me, I don't see any official level discussion happening right now, but there were discussions, the joint working group that was proposed by both countries that happened past few years, and it was since 2005, and then has reached no consensus on this particular issue except saying that this is a humanitarian livelihood issue, which I think doesn't make any sense at all for the Sri Lankan fishermen. So apart from that, it is very clear and obvious when the Sri Lankan Prime Minister stated that this has to be solved cordially between two fishermen. Imagine this is not an issue within one country, this is an issue between two countries and the maritime boundaries involved, and there is the violation of Sri Lankan maritime boundary is being violated by Indian fishermen 36,000 times per year. And this is a serious issue, and the Prime Minister is asking fishermen to talk about this issue. Okay, let's put the fishermen on the table. What has happened in 2010? Both fishermen from both sides, they went on to talk and they agreed a certain feasible measure which was categorically denied by the Sri Lankan government. India did not recognize it at all. So if this was the position that the state has taken by then, what are they expecting now from the fishermen? Right? Because the fishermen have lost complete, Sri Lankan fishermen have lost complete faith in negotiations unless the negotiations come with concrete guarantee from the both government to ensure the agreed terms will be implemented with the government support. So otherwise, on the other hand, there should be a concrete commitment from the Indian side that they will adhere to, find a phasing out period for the trawling in our waters. So if these two conditions are not being met, then I don't see any possibility of having a concrete negotiation. So that's why I said basically I seriously doubt whether has been any serious negotiation on this issue. But one should not mistake the negotiation on the safety and security related to the fishermen in both countries. This was the Indian position from the beginning, because India wanted to make sure that their fishermen that are getting arrested are handled safely and securely, not harassed in the sea. But this is not the larger question for Sri Lankan fishermen.
But Mr. Tyagaraja, just tell us, what can really crack that code? Okay, tell me one aspect that you can leave on the table, on the negotiation table, that the both parties will agree on. One thing that they will agree on.
One thing that of course Indians have already agreed on a phasing out period. What is not being done is that they haven't kept their promises. So there is a serious level of, then you need to look at why they didn't keep on the promise. Because I mean, if you look at the number of trawlers fishing in our waters, it's a huge number. Like, we are not talking about 100, we are talking about thousands. So if you stop 1,000 to 1,000 trawlers, they should have a very concrete plan, economic plan from Tamil Nadu government to replace these trawlers. The problem is they don't have they are not interested, or they don't have a proper plan. So this is not, that's why I said this is not a humanitarian issue. If you look at the number of trawlers and the owners who own the trawlers, this is not simply fishermen. These are commercial entities and enterprises in Tamil Nadu with large capital investments, pushing the fishermen to go into and risk their life in our seas. So this is basically fishermen who comes in the fleet. They are not fishermen, they are like coolies. They are fishing laborers, right? As our leaders from the north, they will correctly point out, I'm sure. These fishermen are being paid $500 per day to cross the boundary.
Reason?
The reason is they don't have fish in their own sea. So if they want to trawl, they have to come into our sea, because we have never used trawling in our seas.
So are you talking about bottom trawling per se?
Yes, it is bottom trawling.
So can I bring in Dr. Muthukrishnan with this debate, where bottom trawling has been something that has been frowned down upon by many countries, from New Zealand, Australia, where they even banned it. How come India still practices this? Does this as it's more like a habitual thing than how come Indian fishermen have not been made aware of this?
Yeah, this is unfortunate. I think from the professional point of view, Indian maritime research institutions have highlighted to the fisher persons as well as the government the hazards of this bottom trawling. How it not only takes away the fish wholesale, but also prevents future breeding of increase in the fish stock. I mean, this is what has happened. But the scientists have limited hold on the commercial and political interests. I mean, like Varda said, these are intermingled. It's not anymore a humanitarian or livelihood issues. Traditionally, yes. From time immemorial, our fisher persons and Indian fisher persons have been harmoniously fishing in the sea because of traditional mode of safe fishing methods. But with technological advancements, unfortunately, modern technology has in fact harmed. Globally, there's a decrease in maritime resources. I mean, it's a global phenomenon, not only in the Port Bay or in the South Asian or Bay of Bengal or elsewhere, but globally there's a fast depletion that is primarily because of very aggressive, in many countries, illegal fishing. I mean, that is why advanced countries have banned. India has banned, or there are restrictions on number of days on which the trawlers could be used. But unfortunately, it is not enforcing that law for Indian trawlers coming into Sri Lankan waters. That is an issue, but recently there have been, to be fair with the Indian government, at least after the new government elected in January this year in Sri Lanka, recently there have been some attempts, even by the Tamil Nadu government, to give some subsidies to these fisher persons who are involved in trawlers to encourage them to get into deep sea fishing, to buy bigger, so that they don't encroach illegally into the Pork Bay and the Pork Strait or Gulf of Mannar. So there have been some attempts, and they have also some buyback schemes whereby if fishermen or fishing business persons have invested a lot of money on trawlers, the government would buy back that trawler for a certain amount, so that they are not left without any capital. So there have been some relatively small change in the mindset, but again, deep sea fishing is a different ball game altogether. Whether the Indian fisher persons are equipped to go into sea for 14 days or even more at once is very difficult to understand, and we don't know how much demand there would be for this recent subsidy scheme announced by the Tamil Nadu government to provide subsidies for buying bigger vessels to go into deep sea fishing.
So what measures do you think the governments should take to mitigate this?
To be honest, I am a professional economist, so I really don't know. I'm sure Mr. Varadas and Mr. Ganesharajan have told about the legal and political aspects. But from our side, from the Institute, Point Peter Institute of Development, what we are trying to help the Sri Lankan fisher persons in northern province is try to propose some scientific and technological ways of preventing or discouraging this form of illegal fishing. Recently we have been in touch with scientists, fisheries scientists, marine researchers in India, particularly in Tamil Nadu. At the professional level, there is understanding of this issue, even in Tamil Nadu. Fisheries experts and marine research centers do understand that their fisher persons are in total violation of the law, and even rather inhuman behavior of illegally taking away the fish of the northern province fisher persons' livelihood. So therefore, we are in touch with the scientists that on the Indian side, they have implemented. So artificial coral reef is one method. In the Indian side, Indian scientists have put artificial coral reefs in certain areas where the trawlers have been fishing to prevent them, because the whole nets and even the trawlers would be damaged if they go to that sea. And they have informed that in those kind of areas there are these artificial reefs. So that's a kind of a preventive measure technologically. That kind of thing our government or even our fisheries department unfortunately has not thought about it. But anyway, from the civil society point of view, we are in touch with some scientists in Tamil Nadu to explore the possibility of using that kind of scientific method to whether we could promote artificial coral reefs to be planted in different parts of this contested sea area. That's a kind of technological solution. But even that, if the fisher person, we are trying to persuade the fishing community, and it's not only the artificial coral reefs would prevent bottom trawling, but it will also increase the fish stock in the sea. So that's a win-win situation in a sense. Therefore, we are talking with the fishing community. They do understand that artificial coral reefs are a good way of improving the fish stock by increasing the breeding of different species and all. And even if we agree upon that, and Indian scientists, Indian technologists and Sri Lankan technologists and scientists agree upon that, ultimately the government of Sri Lanka has to agree for us to really grant it, which Indian government has allowed the marine Central Marine Research Institute to do it. So thereby our government institutions, in addition to law enforcement, stricter law enforcement and perhaps a stronger, harder political bargaining, I think they also have to explore some of the scientific, modern scientific and technological ways of preventing, which would be a win-win situation. Of course, you may remember there was a time when there was a proposal to put up a electric fence by the border. Of course, India naturally shot that suggestion. Actually, that suggestion came from Sri Lankan side. Indian government naturally shot because that could be inhuman, that could kill humans, advertently or inadvertently. So we are not proposing that without any harm to human beings. We are trying to resolve the issue by promotion of certain technological solutions. Of course, artificial coral reefs are expensive. Somebody had to foot the bill. That also the government of Sri Lanka has to take responsibility, even if it cannot afford to obtain some help from international donors to undertake. So we are in the very preliminary stage of that kind of a technological scientific solution. I hope that could perhaps and preferably undercut this legal deterrence or the political sort of evasion of resolving this issue.
Thank you. With that, we head into another commercial break, but when we come back, we speak more on this issue. The Indo-Sri Lanka fishing issue has been having a rippling effect in society, and especially when it comes to the fishermen. They seem to be grappling with it day in and day out. And today we have two leaders representing the Fishermen Cooperative Society unions with us, and they will be speaking in their mother tongue. And the first question I would like to ask them is, tell me the price they have to pay because of this issue.
என்னென்றால் இந்த பிரச்சனையால் இந்தியாவில் வர மீனவால் உங்களுக்கு இவ்வாறான நட்டங்கள் பாதிப்புகள் இழப்புகள் ஏற்படுது என்று கேட்கலாம்.
அதாவது இந்திய விடுதலைப்படைகளாலே எங்களுடைய வாழ்வாதாரம், எங்களுடைய தொழில் உபகரணங்கள், அதாவது இந்திய இழுவப்படகின் வருகின்ற அத்துமீறி வருகின்ற செயல்பாடு எமது மீனவர்கள் செய்கிற பகுதிக்குள்ளே செய்கிறபடியால் அது அந்த இழுவ மடியாது கேபிள் போட்டு ஒரு பார்க்காத கேபிள் இழுவ மடியில் இருக்கின்றது. அந்த கேபிளிலே இந்த எங்களுடைய மீனவருடைய வாழ்க்கை, அதாவது வலைகள் அதில் சிக்கொண்டு அதை அறந்து துவசமாக போகின்றது, முழுமையாக பாதிப்பு ஏற்படுகின்றது, நமது வளமும் அழிகின்றது. ஆகவேதான் இந்த ட்ரோலிங் தொழிலை நாங்கள் நமது எல்லைக்குள்ளே செய்ய வேண்டாம், இங்கே வர வேண்டாம் என்று சொல்லி நாங்கள் எத்தனையோ ஆண்டு காலமாக கத்திக்கொண்டிருக்கின்றோம். ஆனால் இதுவரையிலும் எங்களுக்கு ஒரு முடிவுமே வரையில்லை. வர இன்னும் கூடுதலை தவிர அதை மட்டுப்படுத்தி குறைக்கிறதோ, இது என்று சொன்னால் முற்றாக அழிக்கிறதோ எந்த விதமான தீர்மானத்தையும் இந்திய அரசாங்கம் எடுத்துக்கொண்டிருந்து எங்களுக்கு மிக கவலையாக இருக்கிறது. ஒரு அரசுக்கு நாங்கள் இவ்வளவு எடுத்து கூறியும் அந்த அரசு அதுக்கு செவிமடுக்க என்று சொன்னால் நாங்கள் என்ன செய்வது என்று செய்யாத தடுமாற்றத்தில் இருக்க முடியாது.
Yes, sir, that the government of India has not taken any concrete action to prevent this inhuman action. We are not only losing our fair share of the fish catch, but we are also losing the future streams of fish stock in our seas. In addition, our nets and valuable fishing gears are being taken away, dragged away by these trawlers, and that makes a severe capital loss to our fisher persons. And these are on top of long-term prevention of fishing from our side due to security reasons. So unfortunately, despite the end of the war, we have been not able to recoup loss of income during the wartime, even after the war.
Well, because they can't reap the benefits now out of fishing, have they thought of maybe going into different trades and different
இந்த பாதிப்பாக நீங்கள் யோசிக்கிறீங்களா? வேறு ஏதாவது தொழில்களில் நீங்கள் ஈடுபட வேண்டும் என்ற மாதிரி?
ஆனால் மீனவனை பொறுத்தளவில் மீனவ தொழிலாளிகள் முற்றுமுழுதாக இந்த தொழிலை தான் நம்பி இருக்கின்றார்கள். ஆனால் அதே நேரத்தில் 50,000 குடும்பம் மீனவ குடும்பம் என்று சொன்னால் 50,000 குடும்பங்கள் அந்த வாழ்வாதாரம் பாதிக்கப்படுகிறது. அந்த மீனவ குடும்பத்தை ஒட்டி 1,00,000க்கு மேற்பட்ட மக்கள் பயனடைகிறார்கள், அதே நம்பி இருக்கிறார்கள். ஆகவே மாற்று திட்டம் செய்கிறது என்று ஏற்றுக்கொள்ள முடியாதவர்கள் இல்லை.
So this is their traditional mode of livelihood, which has been for many generations. So basically 50,000 families benefit from this livelihood, which means more than 100,000 people indirectly. So converting them into an alternative profession is very unrealistic. So our expertise on fishing, so why can't we fish?
Okay, Mr. Muthukrishnan Sarvanandan, just a question. Since now talks have been in limbo and there's a lot of discussions that are slated to take place but haven't taken place because both parties don't want to reach a common consensus on this issue. But do you see a brighter side of it for the fishermen where they can pave a way for entrepreneurship, maybe have their own innovations, maybe move away from, not fishing per se, but do something more innovative? Do you see them at least attempting something of that nature?
Yeah, during the time of the Civil War, at least a small proportion of the fisher families or the offsprings or the younger generation of the fisher families have moved into masonry, carpentry and even agriculture. There are also traditionally there have been off seasons of fishing when the sea is rough. They have been. But as Mr. Emilian Pilla said, it is very difficult, if at all not impossible, to change the occupation pattern of the entire community. So, I mean, that is what is happening. Of course, there is a reluctance on part of the newer generation of fishing and even agriculture community in Sri Lanka throughout the country to engage in their traditional vocations, and they are trying to diversify. Again, unfortunately, the government does not have a plan for that. Indian government, on the other hand, promised that give us a grace period of 3 years. We'll try to discourage them or move their fishing community away from fishing to other alternative employment. I mean, they have they have also not implemented that. In Sri Lankan side, unfortunately, if at all, if that is a proposition that has to be told to the fishing community, then the government has to come with an action plan with money and facilities to really diversify their traditional occupational practice. As you know, fishing is not like any other profession because it's a hereditary. They learn the skills from their families or previous generations. It's not that they are taught in school how to fish, so to speak. So a lot of them depend on that,
And this question directed at Mr. Nur Mohammed, who is also representing another fisheries cooperative. Well, you all have a common ground. Fishermen in the northern province have a common ground in terms of reaching a consensus with the fishermen in Tamil Nadu, given that they all speak Tamil, given that they are almost from the same community. So why is it so tough to penetrate through this? Why is it so tough to reach a consensus? If you can maybe.
தமிழ்நாட்டை எடுத்தாலும் அவங்க தமிழ் பேசுகிறவர்கள், வடகிழக்கில் தொழில் செய்கிறவங்களை தமிழ் பேசுகிறவர்கள். எனவே ஏன் இது ரெண்டு கிடையில் நீங்கள் ஒரு தீர்வுக்கோ அல்லது ஏதாவது சமாதான முறையில் செய்து விளையாடலாம் சொல்லுவோம். குறிப்பாக வடபகுதியையும் தமிழ்நாட்டையும் பொறுத்தவரை தமிழ் பேசுகின்ற மக்கள் அவர்களின் தொழில்முறையும் இந்த கடலோடு சார்ந்ததாக இருந்தாலும் தொழிலென்று வரும்போது அல்லது தங்களுக்கான வாழ்வாதாரத்தை இன்னொரு தரப்பு அதை கை வைக்கின்ற போது ஏற்படுகின்ற இழப்பை யாராலுமே ஏற்றுக்கொள்ள முடியாது. ஏனெனில் எமது மீனவர்கள் இந்தியாவில் சென்ற மீன் பிடித்தாலும் இதே நிலை அங்கேயும் இருக்கத்தான் செய்யுது. உறவு முறை வேறு, தொழில் என்பது வேறு. நாங்கள் பசிக்கு உணவை அளிக்கலாம் என்பதற்காக அந்த சோத்து பானையை முழுமையாக வழங்கிவிட முடியாது. அதில் இருக்கும் சோத்தை தான் நாங்கள் பகிர்ந்து கொள்ள முடியும். அவ்வாறுதான் தொழில்முறை. யார்தான் அவர்கள் இனாமாக அல்லது நிவாரணங்களாக பணத்தை தந்தாலும் கூட தொழில் செஞ்சு அதன் ஊடாக வருகின்ற வருமாயின் ஊடாக சாப்பிடுவதைத்தான் யாரும் விரும்புவார்கள். எனவே எமது கடல் வளங்கள் எமது மக்களுக்குரியது. அது தமிழர்களாக இருக்கட்டும் அல்லது சிங்களவராக இருக்கட்டும், அந்த கடல் வளம் இந்த மக்களுக்கானது. அதை இன்னொருவர் சுரண்டுவதையோ அல்லது இன்னொருவர் அதை அத்துமீறி அதன் உள்ள வாழ்வாதாரத்தின் மற்றவரின் வாழ்வாதாரத்தின் கை வைத்து அதை பறிக்கின்ற நிலையிலேயே யாருமே ஏற்றுக்கொள்ள முடியாது. உறவு என்பது வேறு, இங்கு வாழ்வாதாரம் என்பது வேறு. எனவே நிச்சயமாக தொப்புள்கொடரி உறவு என்று கூறிக்கொள்ளும் தமிழர்கள் ஒன்றை புரிந்து கொள்ள வேண்டும். குறிப்பாக தமிழ்நாட்டு தலைவர்கள், இங்கு வாழ்பவர்களும் தமிழர்கள், இந்த கடலை நம்பி வாழ்பவர்களும் தமிழ் பேசுகின்ற மக்கள். எனவே நாங்கள் அங்கு செய்யும் இந்த அடாவடித்தனமான தொழிலின் மூலம் பாதிக்கப்படுகிறது சகோதர இனமான எமது இனம் என்பதை புரிந்து கொண்டாலே எமக்கான அந்த அவர்களின் அத்துமீறலை குறைப்பதற்கு போதுமான காலங்களும் அவர்கள் அந்த தொழிலிலிருந்து மாற்றிக்கொள்வதற்கு தங்களை
மாற்றி அமைப்பதற்கான போதிய காலம் இருந்திருக்கு. எனவே இவர்களுக்கு அவ்வாறான சிந்தனை இல்லை. முற்று முழுதாக இலங்கை கடற்பரப்பை ஆக்கிரமித்து இதனூடாக வருகின்ற, அதாவது இது கடல் தொழில்நுட்பம் என்று சொல்வதற்கு அப்பாலும் ஒரு வர்த்தக நடவடிக்கை மேற்கொள்ளப்படுகின்றது. அதாவது இலங்கையின் கடல் வளத்தை சுரண்டி இந்தியா தனது வல்லமையையும் தனது ஆதிக்கத்தையும் இந்த நாட்டிலும் இந்த பகுதியிலும் நிலைநிறுத்த வேண்டும் என்பதற்காக வர்த்தக செயல்பாடை தவிர இங்கு உறவு என்பதும் தமிழ் பேசும் மக்கள் என்பதும் கருத்து ஏற்றுக்கொள்ளக்கூடியதல்ல.
Thank you. Mr. Sarvanandan, if we can have you translate.
Just because we speak the same language and we are of same ethnicity, it does not mean that we could share our livelihood or we could barter our livelihood. We could share our food or pot of rice, but we can't wholesalely give our pot of rice to another person. After all, we have to make a living as well. We have our families to look after as well. So, after all, when we feel hungry, the language, race, or other differences does not come into play. At the end of the day, everyone has to survive. So that is what we are asking, that we should be allowed our rights to the marine resources in our part of the sea, so that we could make a decent living.
Well, we are just a few minutes away from wrapping things up. I would like to bring the three main panelists on this particular topic. Katchitivu. It has been an uninhabited island, but there is a lot of discussion as to who owns it. But India had recognized it in, if I'm not mistaken, in 1974. It had recognized the Sri Lankan ownership on a conditional agreement. So, does that mean that India and Sri Lanka will have ownership over it, or just what's the mechanism behind it?
It is not so. According to the agreements that have been signed in 74 and 76, it is very clear that the Sri Lankan government is having a right over it, and also certain provisions were there where the pilgrims and fishermen, they have access over it. But that does not mean that India is entitled to have right over it, because that was accepted not only just because of the agreement, on the basis of historically the Sri Lanka is the country which had the right over it.
So I think Katchitivu is a very political issue in Tamil Nadu, and this is, I would rather consider as a political hawk played by Tamil Nadu. And the Sri Lankan territorial right over Katchitivu never been disputed by the Indian central government. Of course, we cannot consider seriously a state disputing over it. So you have to consider the actors who are involved in the whole disputation or so on. So I think the whole suffering of the Sri Lankan fishermen is somewhat undermined by this discussion on Katchitivu, which I think completely irrelevant for us. And I don't think none of the government are serious about renegotiating the Katchitivu. So that is out of the negotiations. What we need really to bring out is that the suffering of Sri Lankan fishermen due to the encroachment of Indian Tamil Nadu fishermen who engage in illegal, unregulated and unreported fishing, which actually go back to this international standard of sustainable fishing. So this is the issue that we need to take. The only way forward is to the feasible, inexpensive way to increase the deterrence that can be enforced by the Sri Lankan Navy. You see now the amount of arrest, less than 1% of the total fishermen poaching into our waters. So imagine 1,500 boats poaching into our waters, you arrest only one boat per month. Does that feasible way to deter? It doesn't represent the intention of the state to protect its boundary. So matter is to increase the amount of arrest and prosecute them under correct law. The current Attorney General Department always uses the law, that immigration and emigration law, which is I think inappropriate law to prosecute these fishermen, because they don't come here for tourist purposes. It is very clear they come here to fish in our waters. So there is a particular designated act for that, that is Foreign Fishing Vessel Act, that was passed in 1979. So we actually, it is a way forward if the government start arresting on regular basis and prosecute them under correct law.
And can I have Mr. Muthukrishnan Sarvanandan also speak a little?
Yeah, I mean, Katchitivu is economically, I think, not as significant, or in fact it's inconsiderable for either country. I mean, there's nobody living there. Once a year there's a church feast which is attended harmoniously by both the countries, and Indian fisher persons have been, I believe correctly, that they have been given rights to dry their nets, otherwise it's not, I think, like Varada said, it's a political game played by, I think it is not going to resolve. If Kachadivu has to be given back to India, in a sense, we are also saying that the agreement between India and Sri Lanka has to be repealed. You know, I think neither government is going to do that. As he mentioned, or as Sri Lankans can understand, this basic livelihood humanitarian issue of the northern fisher persons have been seriously or heavily politicized to play into this power politics between Tamil Nadu and the Sri Lankan national government and the central government of India. It's unfortunate, but the people who are suffering are the fisher persons in the northern province, account for 17% of the total population of the northern province. Unfortunately, they are the unfortunate people who continue to be seriously affected even after the end of the war in terms of their livelihood.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Muthukrishnan Sarvanathan, and all our panelists, and we would like to extend a big thank you and to the two leaders who represented the North. And I hope that was a insightful discussion. We discussed about the political issues and the economic issues pertaining to the Indo-Sri Lanka fishermen problem. And yet again, we will meet you on another edition of a special panel discussion. Until we meet again, take care.